Number 5. Ted Bundy.
The incredibly charismatic and highly intelligent Ted Bundy remains one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, completely defying the era's preconceived notions of what a monster looked like. During the 1970s, Bundy aggressively leveraged his handsome appearance and profound charm to actively hunt young women across multiple states. His deeply chilling modus operandi often involved wearing a fake cast or using crutches, feigning a debilitating injury to exploit the kindness of his victims, whom he would ask for help loading items into his iconic Volkswagen Beetle. Once they were close, he would brutally attack them with a crowbar, handcuff them, and force them into his vehicle. Bundy famously escaped police custody not once, but twice, completely humiliating law enforcement and leading to a terrifying final killing spree at a sorority house in Florida. During his incredibly publicized, highly theatrical murder trials, he aggressively chose to represent himself, treating the courtroom like a massive television stage and even proposing to his girlfriend on the witness stand. Before finally being executed in the electric chair in 1989, Bundy ultimately confessed to 30 horrific murders, although investigators strongly believe his true victim count is significantly higher, cementing his legacy as a deeply terrifying American nightmare.
Number 4. Jeffrey Dahmer. The horrific crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer, often dubbed the Milwaukee Cannibal, represent one of the absolute darkest descents into human depravity ever recorded. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer methodically murdered and dismembered 17 young men and boys, primarily targeting highly marginalized individuals he met at local gay bars or bus stops. His incredibly gruesome methods involved heavily drugging his victims before strangling them and subjecting their bodies to unimaginable horrors, including necrophilia, cannibalism, and keeping skulls and body parts meticulously preserved in his refrigerator. In a deeply frustrating and tragic failure of law enforcement, Dahmer narrowly avoided capture on multiple occasions, most notably when 2 police officers actually returned a heavily bleeding, disoriented 14-year-old victim directly back to Dahmer's apartment, completely believing Dahmer's lie that it was merely a lover's quarrel. The terrifying reign of the Milwaukee Cannibal finally ended when his last intended victim, Tracy Edwards, bravely managed to escape and lead police back to the apartment, where they made the horrific, stomach-churning discoveries. Dahmer was subsequently beaten to death by a fellow inmate in 1994 while serving multiple consecutive life sentences, closing an incredibly dark chapter in criminal history. Number 3. John Wayne Gacy.
Known permanently to history as the Killer Clown, John Wayne Gacy was an incredibly prolific American serial killer and highly respected community figure who led a terrifying double life. To his neighbors in suburban Chicago, Gacy was a highly successful building contractor, a prominent political organizer, and a friendly, outgoing man who regularly dressed as Pogo the Clown to entertain children at local hospitals and charitable events. However, behind his incredibly carefully crafted public persona hid a deeply sadistic predator. Throughout the 1970s, Gacy aggressively lured teenage boys and young men, often offering them construction jobs, into his home. Once inside, he would perform a magic trick involving handcuffs, completely rendering them helpless before brutally torturing and strangling them. When the intense police investigation into the disappearance of a local 15-year-old boy finally zeroed in on Gacy, authorities executed a search warrant on his property. What they discovered completely horrified the nation. Gacy had meticulously buried the deeply decomposed bodies of 29 victims directly in the cramped crawl space beneath his house, and dumped 4 others in a nearby river. Gacy was executed by lethal injection in 1994, but the profound, terrifying legacy of the Killer Clown continues to haunt the American psyche.
Number 2. Richard Ramirez.
During the incredibly hot and deeply terrifying summer of 1985, the sprawling city of Los Angeles was held completely hostage by a deeply sadistic serial killer dubbed the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez aggressively terrorized the citizens of California through a series of highly chaotic and incredibly brutal home invasions. Unlike traditional serial killers who carefully targeted specific demographics, Ramirez attacked anyone, men, women, and children, using a terrifying variety of weapons including handguns, knives, machetes, and tire irons. His horrific crimes were heavily influenced by his deep obsession with Satanism. He often forced his terrified victims to swear allegiance to Satan and notoriously drew pentagrams on the walls using lipstick or the victim's blood. The entire city was completely paralyzed by fear, with hardware stores selling out of locks, guard dogs, and firearms. The massive, highly publicized manhunt finally ended in a dramatic, incredibly public fashion when a group of furious citizens actively chased Ramirez down a busy street in East Los Angeles and brutally beat him until the police arrived to arrest him. Ramirez remained entirely unrepentant, notoriously flashing a pentagram drawn on his palm during his trial. He spent 23 years on death row before dying of cancer in 2013.
Number 1. Aileen Wuornos.
Aileen Wuornos is one of the most famous and fiercely debated female serial killers in American history. A deeply troubled woman with a horrific, incredibly traumatic childhood characterized by severe abuse and abandonment, Wuornos survived by working as a highly vulnerable sex worker along the dangerous highways of Florida. Between 1989 and 1990, Wuornos shot and killed 7 men who had picked her up. At her highly publicized, deeply sensationalized trial, she vehemently argued that she had acted purely in self-defense, claiming that all 7 men had either violently raped her or aggressively attempted to do so. However, the prosecution successfully argued that she had meticulously planned the murders to rob the men of their cash and vehicles, pointing to the incredibly high number of victims and the fact that she had pawned their belongings. The case sparked intense, highly polarizing national debates regarding gender roles, sex work, and the deeply flawed criminal justice system's treatment of female victims of violence.
Wuornos was ultimately convicted and sentenced to death.
After spending over a decade on death row, she fired her attorneys and demanded execution, famously declaring, "I'll be back," just moments before she was executed by lethal injection in 2002.